Is America really afraid of India? That's the question everybody's been whispering, everybody's been tweeting, everybody's been debating on TV panels. Some say it's just noise, others say it's real, but deep down the truth is this. When a nation rises the way India has been rising, you can't ignore it. You can't brush it aside, and you sure can't pretend it doesn't shake the balance of power. See, America ain't used to anybody playing on the same field. For decades, they set the rules, they controlled the narrative. They told the world who's strong, who's weak, who's rising, who's falling. And most nations, they just followed, they nodded, they listened, they obeyed, but now, here comes India, and India ain't just playing anymore, it's leading, it's setting its own course, it's walking into the room with confidence, and that right there has the U.S. Sweating in ways they won't admit out loud. Let's talk real. America's got power, no doubt, military, strongest on earth. Economy, huge, innovative, dominating, culture, influencing every corner of the world. But for the first time in a long time, America is looking across the table and realizing, wait a second, this ain't the same India we used to know. This ain't the India of just outsourcing call centers or writing cheap code. This is an India with rockets reaching the moon, missiles that can shake up the region, a digital economy bigger than most nations, and a youth population so massive, so ambitious. It makes America look old and tired. That's the fear, not fear of a war, not fear of destruction, but fear of being replaced. Fear of no longer being the one everyone looks up to. Fear of a new face at the top of the table. Think about it. India was once colonized, broken, starved, exploited. A country people looked at with pity, but in just a few decades, it flipped the whole script. From poverty to power, from weakness to strength, from dependence to independence. Now, when India speaks, nations listen. When India signs deals, the world takes notes. When India builds alliances, America watches carefully because they know every handshake India makes could shift the balance of global power. And that right there is why America's nervous. They don't like not being in control of the outcome. You ever notice how America talks about India now? They don't treat it like some side player anymore. They call it a strategic partner. They invite it to the big tables. They flatter it with compliments, but behind closed doors they calculate every move. Because they know India is too big, too smart, too determined to be anyone's pawn. See, when you got one, 4 billion people, half of them under 30, hungry for success, hustling every single day, you don't just have a nation. You got an unstoppable wave, and waves change the shorelines. Waves rewrite the map. That's what India is doing. Now, let's get real. America ain't scared of India like a boxer is scared of another fighter. It's more like an aging champion who suddenly sees a new contender rise up out of nowhere. Stronger, fresher, faster, and the champ's thinking, if I don't adapt, if I don't change, this young blood is about to take my crown. That's the kind of fear we're talking about, respectful fear, strategic fear. The kind of fear that makes you smile in public but scramble in private. See, here's the thing. America built its power on being the center of everything. The dollar, the military, the technology, the influence. But India is challenging every single one of those. The dollar, India's pushing for trade in rupees, building currency links with Russia, Middle East, and Africa. Military, India's buying, building, and upgrading weapons faster than most nations can blink. Technology, India's got more engineers graduating every year than America's even got students in some fields. Influence, Bollywood, yoga, spirituality, culture, democracy, all of it spreading worldwide. That ain't just progress, that's competition. And America don't like competition at this level. Look at the CEO running the biggest companies in the U.S. Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, Pepsi before, and the list goes on. Who are they? Indians. Now imagine being America, proud of being the land of opportunity, only to realize the ones seizing those opportunities the hardest are not your own, but people from halfway across the world. That's respect, yes, but it's also intimidation. Because if Indians can run America's companies, what's stopping India from running the future? Let's talk geopolitics for a second. America built alliances to keep control, NATO in Europe, military pacts in Asia, dollar-based trade worldwide. But India ain't playing by the old playbook. It does business with the U.S., yes, but also with Russia, with Iran, with the Middle East, with Africa, with whoever serves its national interest. India buys Russian oil, American weapons, Israeli technology, French jets, and then turns around and sells software, medicine, and space solutions to the world. That's independence. That's confidence. And for America, used to nations picking sides, that independence is scary. Because if India doesn't need to choose, then maybe other nations don't either. And if other nations don't either, America's grip weakens. See, fear ain't always about losing a fight. Sometimes fear is about losing control. America is realizing it can't pressure India the way it pressures others. You can sanction smaller nations, you can intimidate weaker economies, but India. Sanction India and you lose your tech workers, your cheap medicine, your strategic partner in Asia. Threaten India and you push it closer to Russia or China. Ignore India and you miss out on the biggest market of the century. That's the trap. America needs India, and anytime you need someone you can't fully control, fear creeps in. Think about the military balance. America is strong globally, but India is strong regionally, especially in South Asia. Pakistan can't compete. China might have numbers but not trust, and India's got the brains, the weapons, and the strategy that makes India the power player in Asia, and America don't like sharing the stage. But now it has to. Let's talk about culture too. America once exported its culture everywhere. Hollywood, fast food, music, lifestyle. But today, people are chanting mantras, practicing yoga, eating Indian food, watching Bollywood, listening to Indian entrepreneurs. The cultural flow is no longer one way. India is shaping minds, shaping trends, shaping how the world thinks. And that soft power, that influence, it scares America because influence is where true power lies. You can have weapons, but if people stop believing in your story, your weapons don't matter. India is telling its own story now, and people are listening. Now let's talk economics. America's economy is huge, no doubt. But India's growth, it's like a rocket ship. Fastest, growing major economy in the world, millions lifted out of poverty, digital infrastructure unmatched anywhere. Think about this. In America, people still use credit cards and cash. In India, a fruit vendor on the street is taking payments with QR codes and instant transfers. That's not just catching up, that's leapfrogging, and America sees that. They know India ain't trying to copy them anymore. India is creating its own systems, its own way, and the world is buying in. That's power, and power, when it shifts, makes the old guard nervous. See, fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It shows up in how careful America chooses its words about India. It shows up in how quickly they send envoys to smooth over tensions. It shows up in how they avoid criticizing India the way they criticize others. Why? Because deep down they know. Push too hard, and India might just push back harder. And if that happens, America loses influence in Asia, in trade, in global politics. That's the game, that's the balance, that's the fear. Now, I ain't saying America is weak, far from it. But even the strongest know when a challenger is rising. And America knows India is no longer content with being the back office of the world. India wants the corner office. India wants the seat at the head of the table. And more importantly, India wants to do it its way, not by copying the West, not by following anyone's script, but by writing its own story. That's the kind of ambition that can't be ignored. So is America really afraid of India? Let me put it this way. Fear doesn't always mean panic. Fear sometimes means respect. Fear sometimes means adjustment. Fear sometimes means staying up at night thinking, how do we deal with this new reality? And right now, America is in that space. It respects India, it partners with India, it praises India. But deep down, it fears the day India is no longer just rising, but risen. Because when that day comes, the world won't just revolve around Washington anymore. It'll revolve around Delhi too, and you better believe that day is coming. India ain't asking for permission, it ain't waiting for validation, it ain't slowing down for anybody. India is moving, India is building, India is leading. And when a nation with that kind of size, that kind of population, that kind of ambition starts leading, the whole world has to adjusting, including America. So yes, in boardrooms, in war rooms, in strategy sessions, America feels it. That nervous energy, that realization, that subtle but undeniable fear, not fear of losing a war, fear of losing the monopoly on being the one everyone follows. Because the truth is, more and more nations are looking to India now. And when the world starts following someone else, even the mightiest feel the weight. The real fear is that the world might one day follow India's lead instead of America's. For decades, the global order has been centered around Washington. America set the pace, wrote the rules, and every other nation was expected to keep in step. From military alliances to global finance, from technology to cultural exports, America has been the conductor of the orchestra, and the rest of the world played along. But today, as India rises, as it asserts itself, as it carves out a path different from what the West has dictated, that comfortable rhythm is breaking. And that is what really shakes America. Not the idea that India is growing stronger, but the possibility that India becomes strong enough to inspire others to walk a new path, one where America isn't the leader, but just another player. America is used to being the standard. The dollar is the standard currency. The Hollywood blockbuster is the standard in film. The U.S. university degree is the standard in education. Even in politics, America promoted itself as the standard of democracy. But now India is showing the world that you can rise to power, you can embrace democracy, you can maintain sovereignty, and you don't have to do it the American way. India didn't build its empire by invading nations. It didn't dominate by overthrowing governments. It grew by investing in its people, in its technology, in its culture. That alone makes it a new kind of model. And when other nations see that, they start asking themselves, why should we follow America's script when India's playbook might work better for us? That thought, that possibility, is America's deepest fear. Because here's the truth. The world is changing, and people are tired of being told who they can trade with, who they should align with, what currency they must use, and whose approval they need to grow. India represents the alternative. When America sanctions countries, India finds a way to do business with them anyway. When America pressures nations to pick sides, India says no, we'll stand in the middle, we'll do what's best for us. That independence is powerful because it shows smaller nations they don't have to bow down either. And if enough nations follow that path, America's dominance begins to slip away, not because of war, not because of collapse, but because people simply stop looking to Washington for leadership. They look to New Delhi instead. Think about what's happening with global trade. America has long relied on the dollar being the world's reserve currency. That gave it unmatched power, power to sanction, to control, to dictate. But India is quietly shifting the game. It's trading with Russia in rupees, with the Middle East in local currencies, with Africa in new agreements that bypass the dollar altogether. It's not about destroying the dollar. It's about showing the world that the dollar isn't the only way, and once people see there's another option, that seed gets planted. If India can do it, why can't they? That's how leadership shifts. By example, not by force, and America knows this. If the world follows India's financial independence, the U.S. loses one of its greatest tools of power. The same goes for technology. America has been the hub of innovation, Silicon Valley being the dreamland for startups. But India is building its own Silicon Valleys. Not one, not two, but in cities all across the country. And here's the twist. It's not just innovation for the elite. It's innovation that reaches the masses. In America, high-tech banking is for people with credit cards. In India, digital payments reach the poorest street vendor. In America, healthcare is expensive and exclusive. In India, generic medicines are produced cheap and sent worldwide, saving millions of lives. This model of inclusive growth, of technology for everyone, that's powerful. Because when developing nations look at America's system, they see a ladder too high to climb. But when they look at India's system, they see hope. They see a model they can copy. And if they start following India's model of growth instead of America's, the influence of Washington fades. Culture is another battlefield. America has long held the soft power crown, Hollywood, pop music, jeans, fast food. But India is exporting something different. Yoga is everywhere. Indian spirituality is being embraced by people searching for meaning beyond materialism. Bollywood is reaching global audiences, and Indian cuisine has already taken over major cities around the world. It's not about replacing American culture. It's about offering an alternative. And the moment an alternative exists, people have a choice. Once again, America loses monopoly, and that's what America fears most. Not just India's rise, but India inspiring the rest of the world to realize they can rise differently. Now, let's get into geopolitics. America built alliances to keep control, NATO in Europe, military bases across the world, deals that tied nations to Washington. But India plays a different game. It joins alliances when it benefits, it avoids when it doesn't, and it refuses to be anyone's puppet. That kind of sovereignty is contagious. Look at how India balances ties with the U.S. and Russia at the same time. Look at how it engages with China even while competing with it. Look at how it works with the Middle East, Africa, and Europe without being trapped by one side. This balanced diplomacy is a blueprint for other nations, especially in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They see India saying no to pressure, yes to independence, and they start thinking, maybe we can do that too. If more nations follow, America's strategy of forcing choices no longer works, and that terrifies Washington, because America's strength has always been that it sets the narrative and others follow. But India's rise proves you don't have to follow. You can lead your own way, and the moment nations stop following America automatically, America loses its superpower aura. Imagine a world where trade is done in multiple currencies, where alliances are flexible, where technology isn't controlled by Silicon Valley, and where culture isn't dominated by Hollywood. Imagine a world where nations look to India for leadership on technology, to Africa for leadership on resources, to Latin America for leadership on agriculture. That's a multipolar world. That's a world where America is still strong but no longer supreme. And India is the spark that can ignite that future. Even within America, you see the signs of this fear. Look at who's leading their top companies. Indians, look at who's being hired in tech, in medicine, in finance. Indians, America benefits from this brainpower, yes, but it also shows them a truth they can't ignore. If the best minds from India can run American companies, what happens when they stay in India and run Indian companies? What happens when they build the next Google or the next Microsoft, not in California, but in Bangalore or Hyderabad? That's not a far-off dream anymore. It's happening. And once that happens at scale, the innovation crown shifts. America knows it, and that is why they fear it. Military power is another part of the equation. America still dominates globally, but India is becoming the anchor in Asia. It has one of the largest standing armies, a rapidly modernizing navy, a growing air force, and nuclear weapons. And unlike America's allies, India doesn't host U.S. bases, doesn't depend on U.S. protection, doesn't rely on Washington for its security. That makes it unique. For America, that's unsettling, because if India becomes the regional security provider, smaller nations in Asia may look to Delhi instead of Washington for stability. That's a shift in influence no superpower wants to see. But the biggest fear is psychological. For decades, America told the story that it was the land of opportunity, the leader of freedom, the model for development. And most of the world bought into that story. But now India is telling its own story, a story of resilience, a story of rising from colonization to confidence, a story of lifting millions from poverty while maintaining democracy, a story of diversity, complexity, and unity. And people are listening, people are inspired, because unlike America's story, which is rooted in being the global policeman, India's story is about empowerment, about showing that a nation can rise without dominating others, about proving that leadership can come from cooperation, not coercion. That story is powerful, and if the world believes in India's story more than America's, then the shift is complete. So when you ask, is America really afraid of India, understand this. It's not about fear of tanks or bombs or trade wars. It's about fear of losing the role of being the one everyone follows. It's about fear that India, through its example, through its independence, through its success, might inspire others to step out of line, to think differently, to act differently. And once that starts, America can't stop it. Because leadership built on fear and control fades. Leadership built on inspiration spreads. That's why India is the nation to watch. That's why America pays close attention. And that's why deep down America knows the truth. The world just might follow India's lead one day.